So, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to give an update or kind of maybe hopefully provide some clarification on the new rule that USDA's put out related to interstate movement of cattle and identification requirements for those cattle that are moving in those channels. And so, like I say, I'm T.R. Lansford. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Assistant State Veterinarian for with Animal Health Commission, and I've been back in this role since February, which was just in time for this rule to new and come out, and then be put in the Federal Register to be announced as the final rule and an implementation date. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I always think it's important when we talk about animal disease traceability to think about, what does that mean, and what is animal disease traceability. And it really boils down to animal disease traceability is being able to know where diseased and or at-risk animals are, like exposed animals are, where they've been, and when they were at that location. And I always try to get producers to think about the flip side of that too, and we'll talk about that in terms of the economic impact of some of these disease events. But as much as anything, it not only helps us find where the diseased or exposed animals may be or where they've been, it also helps us find ones that are not diseased, and that's important in terms of the economic impact. It's also important, I think, to think that animal disease traceability, or remember, animal disease traceability does not prevent disease. This is just a system. It has nothing to do with whether an animal is going to get exposed or not. From a production standpoint, until we're in the middle of a disease situation, we start sorting these animals out for high-risk animals and hoping to prevent their exposure to naive populations to help stop the spread of a disease there. So overall, an efficient and accurate system is going to reduce, most importantly, the number of animals involved or exposed and the time that it takes to respond to a disease event. And from an economic standpoint, that's the two most critical factors. If we can limit the number of animals and decrease the amount of time in a disease event, then we're going to decrease the economic strain or economic impact of a disease event. So certainly an important component of disease response is animal disease traceability. And we talked about that, or alluded to this just a little bit related to animal disease traceability and limiting the impact of those disease events. And the fact that one of the things we want to do in a catastrophic disease event, such as God forbid something like hoof and mouth disease or that would break out in the country, is be able to quickly establish disease-free zones, because the first thing that's going to happen when we diagnose hoof and mouth disease in this country is we're going to lose all our export markets, and it's going to have a very detrimental effect on our domestic markets too, right? Because we're not going to be able to allow things to move to markets and to harvest as they normally do. So all of those things are going to have an impact on the economy related to livestock production and cattle production. Being able to find those disease-free pockets will get us back into the business of being able to assure our foreign trading partners that those areas are disease-free, those animals are disease-free, and we know for sure which ones are disease-free because of a good ID system, so that we can get those markets back open and restore trade with those animals and those products. So that's kind of the big reasons we need to have a good animal disease traceability is to help decrease or minimize that economic impact. And certainly over the years, USDA has been committed to implementing a modern animal disease traceability system. I'm going to talk about a little bit of this more specifically, but overall their goals are, to be able to create a system or build a better system that helps better track animals from birth to slaughter, to continue to use that bookend approach from when an animal gets tagged at birth, or at first commingling with other animals, or at some kind of regulatory test, or a vaccination event, an event of in the case of official capital vaccination of heifers for brucellosis, and to follow that, to be able to follow that through to the end of life event, whether that's slaughter or harvest or just natural causes out in the pasture on a ranch somewhere. So USDA has also tried to stay committed to the use of affordable technology and technology that will also be quick and rapid so that traceability activities can occur at the speed of commerce, which is an important component in peacetime for sure, but also plays into how rapidly we can respond to animal disease in the event of an outbreak. So all that said, the new EID rule kind of puts some of that together to reach those parts that came out of this from the original ADT rule, and some of you may remember this back in 2013 when USDA put the first interstate livestock traceability for livestock moving interstate rule out that clarified which classes of cattle had to be officially identified, and it at that point did not specify what type of tag would be used. But certainly I was working for Animal Health Commission at that point in time, and there was some consternation with some of the groups about this ID requirement, but certainly we've all gotten past that and are looking for better ways to do this, and that's where the electronic ID comes in. But in general, it's important to remember that even back in 2013, the classes of cattle that required official ID to move interstate were all sexually intact cattle 18 months of age and older, dairy cattle to include females regardless of age, dairy bulls 18 months of age or older, and dairy steers. And a lot of that had to do with those risk factors associated with that production system in terms of things like tuberculosis and being able to track those animals as they move. And then the other class of cattle included those used in rodeo shows, exhibitions, or recreational events. And so just a side note there that these are interstate, but just a reminder that some cattle moving in the state do require official ID because they're traveling to or participating in exhibition events that are considered interstate events because they have cattle from multiple states being exhibited. And so you think about some of the major stock shows and open cattle and even junior heifers that are being exhibited those. And that's sort of why there's a requirement for those in-state movements to have official ID as well. So along about 2018, USDA started talking about electronic components to the ADT system to include some overarching goals that they had, and that included the use of the electronic ID tags as one component, and others were the opportunity to advance electronic sharing of data among all the stakeholders, especially during a disease outbreak event, but also to continue to build or enhance that ability to track animals, to have a system that would better track animals from birth to slaughter through the production process. And then lastly, to elevate the discussion with states and industry to work toward a system where producers and veterinarians, primarily veterinarians for producers, will work with state animal health officials to start utilizing electronic certificates of veterinary inspection, or ECVIs, to help be able to transmit that data electronically, which increases the accuracy and improves accuracy, and certainly improves the speed at which that information is exchanged. So all of that discussion related to electronic components to the ADT system, and certainly the electronic tag component, kind of came together in January of 2023, so a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago, when USDA finally proposed the current rule and received more than 2,000 comments that they had to respond to and work through prior to being able to put forth a final rule there. And that took them a little over a year to put that out. And so in April of this year, April of 26th, they put out the final rule in the Federal Register for the rule to become effective November 5th of this year, that updated the rule to include the electronic ID. And so I think that's, when we look at this slide, is the most important take-home message related to the new ADT rule. Is the most substantive change relates to the type of tag that's required for ID in cattle that are moving between states. And that new tag requirement is that it has to be visually and electronically readable. And prior to this rule, it didn't have to be electronically readable, but now it does. So enter the era of the radio frequency ID device, or RFID tag, or electronic ID. And again, this is for cattle that are moving in between states or in interstate movements. The rule also did clarify a few things related to record requirements, and mostly that had to do with the accuracy and content of some of those records, and clarify who had to keep the records as official ID is being applied. It's important to note, though, that for cattle moving within the state, the Texas Animal Health Commission has not and doesn't really plan at this point to propose any changes to our rules for in-state cattle movements or in-state identification requirements for cattle or bison. So again, this new rule is applying to those cattle that are moving between states. The classes of cattle that require official ID did not change either. In terms of what's moving interstate and having to be officially ID'd, it's still sexually intact cattle and bison 18 months of age and older. The rules clarified a little bit to say all dairy cattle instead of piecemealing it out and describing different classes, but just to say all dairy cattle. And then consistent with the 2013 rule, cattle and bison of any age for rodeos, exhibitions, or other types of shows. So, and I've said it once, if I've said it once, I've said it 100 times already. Again, this only applies to animals that are moving between states. Wanted to include, though, that there are still some other approved ID within the ADT rule, the federal rule, which is in Title IX of the Code of Federal Regulation in Chapter 86. Primarily, the change here was, again, the RFID or electronically readable tags, but they're still in the rule that brands registered with a brand authority, so this would be applicable to states that require brand inspections, that those animals registered with recognized brand authority and accompanied by an official brand inspection certificate if the receiving and the shipping state's animal health officials approve of that ID can be used as official ID. And similarly for breed registration tattoos and fire brands, provided again the shipping and receiving states are in agreement for those tattoos and brands to be official ID. Can count as official ID as long as the animal moves with breed registration papers. So the last one that's still on the books relates to group and lot identification, which is something that's really common in the swine industry because it's very, very much so integrated. Not so much in the cattle industry. There are a few very large producers that put groups of cattle together and move them through the production process as a group that stays together the whole time, and there's an allowance for those groups of animals to move. But as we all know, in general, the cattle industry in the United States does not lend itself very well to being able to put cattle together like that and move them. So, related to the updated rule in Texas and the role of Animal Health Commission, well, the Animal Health Commission is the primary administrator of a cooperative agreement with USDA APHIS. We received some funds to help distribute tags, to purchase tags, and to purchase equipment to apply tags, and then to pass that out to producers and veterinarians. And so the other things that we do is we maintain systems that capture location, well, some location, but at least contact information for producers, so that when we issue tags out to them, we know who they go to and where that goes. And those systems are only open to the state of Texas. In the event of a disease outbreak, then at that point, those systems can talk to federal systems to help start the ID process or the animal disease tracing process and help with permitting and things like that. But in general, we do not share that information, and nobody has access to it other than Animal Health Commission. So I mentioned that we do have a no-cost EID tag program, and wanted to kind of end up our presentation tonight with information about how to get a hold of RFIDs. We have a little over 1 million RFIDs in inventory right now, and since 2020, when the RFID distribution program started, this no-cost RFID tag program started, we've distributed more than 1.5 million of these tags. So We certainly have plenty of these tags and welcome producers to reach out to us and request these free tags for use in replacement cattle. And certainly we're providing these tags, the white tags and the official calf foot vaccination tags, to accredited veterinarians as they do herd work, and certainly as they do work that requires official ID to move cattle between states. So I think that's the end of the slide presentation. You know, obviously a big part of what we do is outreach, and we want everybody to understand what the rule really means. And by and large, you know, our interaction with folks has been that once everybody figures out that, you know, most people are not really going to be affected by this, because most producers aren't moving cattle between states or doing interstate movements. Everybody kind of sees what we're doing and understands that, and that helps kind of put everybody at ease.